So I'm joined today by Amna Mackin, who is our project manager on the Prairie Green Landfill, and she's going to have a ton of specific detail to share. So I'll make some opening comments, and then Amna will walk us through her presentation. She's got a lot of good visuals to help illustrate the search method and some of the related issues, and then we'll open it up for questions. I wanted to begin, however, by just commenting on the sad passing of Larry Updike. Larry was a real pro in terms of the broadcasting field. I had the immense privilege of getting a chance to work with him when I was a journalist, and in particular during the flood of 2011. I'd be phoning in updates, and he'd be live on the radio. And one of the great things about Larry is that he was such a pro. He had like the flow and natural ups and downs of an interesting conversation. He wasn't just reading a list of questions. He was making radio and was so good at it. So to all of Larry's friends and family, and to his many fans and longtime listeners, I just wanted to take a moment to extend my condolences and to say on a personal level, I'm very sad to hear the news. Larry was a great guy, a great Manitoban, and we're sad to see him go. The work that we carry out as the Manitoba government occurs on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Anishinaabe, the Inuit, the Cree, the Dene, the Métis, and the Inuit nations. And so it's always important for us to acknowledge those Indigenous nations and the ancestral connection to the lands, water, and air. As a leader of the provincial government, I also want to thank those communities for their support and collaboration, including on this very important topic that we're about to talk about here today. I think one of the things that Indigenous nations always put first and foremost in many ceremonies is remembering who came before us and honoring the dignity of everyone in the community. And at the end of the day, that's what the landfill search of Prairie Green is all about. I think we as a province, just as we do as individuals, have choices that we want to make in life that articulate who we are, the values that we believe in, the things that we stand for. And when we talk about moving ahead with the search of the Prairie Green Landfill, to me this is about sending a message to everyone in Manitoba that you matter, that every single person in this province has dignity, and that when somebody goes missing, we go looking because we care. We care about one another in this province. And it was never our choice to make this a political issue. That decision was made for us. But once this entered the political sphere, our team, after listening to the family members of those involved and Indigenous leaders as well, we made the commitment to do a compassionate search of the Prairie Green Landfill. And the mission that we're shedding light on today is a very important one. It's a mission to attempt to recover the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran. So I want to acknowledge the tremendous advocacy effort that these two families have brought forward to ensure that this issue remains on our public agenda, and indeed the national agenda at that. And last week, when we had the opportunity to visit Prairie Green, after spending some time here with Amna and sharing the plans with these families and Indigenous leaders and cultural leaders who have been supporting these families, we also had the opportunity to spend some time at the Prairie Green site with daughters, siblings, grandparents of Morgan and Marcedes. And it was a very powerful time to stand on the site and to just, after we had smoked a pipe and done our ceremonial process together, to just watch them and talk to them and listen to them. And what I would share as the person who's been honored to serve in the role that I currently have is that there is something significant about what these families are bringing forward that is bigger than any of us. And it is an ability to speak a truth and an ability to ask the public of Manitoba to live up to the ideals that I think we all agree on, which again are ideals of caring, committedness to one another, and an idea for a social good. So with that in mind, I just wanted to thank sincerely the family of Morgan Harris and the family of Marcedes Myran for never stopping with their advocacy and continuing to call on us collectively as Manitobans and specifically as your provincial government to do the right thing. And so there was a challenging period among many for them, but for us, when we weren't able to speak about the landfill search operation, which is something that we've been working on since the early days of our administration, out of respect for the court process. But now that the judge has taken that away and will be soon coming back with his verdict, we are able to talk about the search operation. And so today we've invited you in to give you much the same presentation that we shared with the families last week. And this is a robust, comprehensive, thorough search plan, the goal of which is to, for compassionate reasons, recover the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran. We are very lucky in the provincial government to work with many excellent public servants who have a ton of expertise and a commitment to serving the well-being of the people of Manitoba. And one of those public servants is here with us today. Her name is Amna Mackin. She is a professional engineer and a project manager by trade. But as is relevant to us being gathered here today, she is the lead on the Prairie Green Landfill search. She is the project manager for this process. She's designed the staged approach that we're going to walk through here, and throughout it has kept compassion for the families, commitment to serving the collective good of all Manitobans, and of conducting this search in a respectful, professional way at the top of her mind throughout. So I'm very, very honored that we get to come to work with someone like Amna, and I'll invite her now to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Premier. Good afternoon, everyone. As Premier said, my name is Amna Mackin. I'm an Assistant Deputy Minister with the Government of Manitoba, and I've been assigned as Project Management Lead for the Prairie Green Landfill search. As Premier said, we've developed a plan to search for the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran, and this plan has been developed in collaboration with Waste Connections of Canada, as well as a strong team of technical experts. And so we had a chance to sit down with the families last week and share our plan as well as our progress to date, and today we can share information more broadly with you all as well. So starting with the background, the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran are believed to have been deposited at the Prairie Green Landfill site on May 16th of 2022. A year later, a landfill search feasibility study led by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs was released in May of 2023. It found that an on-site search of the Prairie Green Landfill was feasible, but there were risks to exposure to toxic chemicals and asbestos. Then earlier this year, the Interrelated Operational Planning Report, again, led by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, was released in January. It proposed a construction of an off-site search facility. And I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge all the significant time and effort that went into producing both the feasibility study and the planning report. There was significant effort put forth by the families, by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, Long Plain First Nation, the technical subcommittees, and a number of other contributors. So we've taken a careful review of both the study and the planning report, and we really aimed to develop a plan that was both thoughtful and considerate of the recommendations that were made. So very early on in our initial planning processes, we established guiding principles for the search. We set out for the search to be planned in a respectful manner with the following in mind: that there be collaboration with the families, Indigenous leaders, elders, Prairie Green Landfill, and authorities for a timely and culturally respectful search; that safety would be made a priority, working within legislative and regulatory requirements; and that there would be a framework to provide status updates and outcomes to the families, Indigenous leaders, authorities, and the public. So with those principles guiding us, we got to work on our plan. So when developing our plan, a family's first approach was very important as we move forward during our initial planning activities. And within the study and planning report, there were a number of recommendations that were particularly impactful to families and the community. Both the study and the planning report recommended the 5 items you see on screen as a minimum criteria as it relates to community and family wishes, many of which were recommended to be planned as deemed appropriate by elders and knowledge keepers. And so the first recommendation was for ceremonies to begin and end the search. The second was for a specified and weather-appropriate location to convene in a good way. The third was for on-site presence during all search hours of trauma-informed individuals. The fourth was for on-site traditional medicines and spiritual assistance. And the fifth was related to sacred fire. There have been a number of ceremonies to date, including the ones that took place with the families last week, and there's commitment for future ceremonies. There is a healing space that's under construction that will address the second recommendation. And our plan also includes funding commitments to provide a range of healing and wellness supports to address the last 3 recommendations. And those would be for mental supports, traditional medicines, sacred fire, as well as honoraria for elders and knowledge keepers to participate. So again, it's been our intention from the start to conduct the search in a culturally respectful way, and we've tried to understand and incorporate the wishes that were put forth in both the feasibility study and planning report. Our plan also includes a proposed oversight committee. We know how important it is to the families for them to be able to participate in the search and to also make sure the search is completed in a way that's respectful of their loved ones. So the proposed oversight committee includes representation from both the Harris and Myran families, as well as an Indigenous elder. And through this participation, we believe that members of the oversight committee will be able to give meaningful input to the search as it proceeds moving forward. And we also see the oversight committee as a voice to make sure the search proceeds in a manner that's consistent with the guiding principles that we shared earlier. We also recognize that there's time and effort that'll be needed to participate in the oversight committee, so we're committing to have funding in place so that the families and the elder can participate. Now I'd like to give some specific progress updates for the search, starting with regulatory and permitting. One of the first technical milestones for the search was obtaining approval of a notice of alteration through the Environmental Approvals Branch, and we're happy to say that approval was granted last week, which marks a very critical milestone for the search. In regards to permitting, we first needed a development permit to start our on-site work at PGL. That permit has now been issued, and we'll be obtaining building permits and other permits as required. So those approvals to date are really significant as it allows us the regulatory and permitting framework to move forward with our site work at PGL. Moving on, I'll provide an overview of the temporary structures that we'll be using to support the search. Again, building off the recommendations that were in the feasibility study. We're going to construct a temporary search facility, and it will be a prefabricated fabric-covered building. We will also need a number of temporary support buildings, which will be construction trailers or something similar, and those will be used for spaces for administrative offices, washrooms, lunch and break rooms, forensics, cold storage, and other spaces as required. And for the families to gather, there will be a healing space, and it will be a ready-to-move type of building. On this slide, we can see the site layout at the Prairie Green Landfill. For those that may not be familiar, on the north half of the site, we see the active Phase 1 operation for PGL. The area shown in green is the area of waste that the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran may be located in. The south half of the site is PGL's future planned Phase 2 operation, and so we're going to use a portion of that area shown shaded in orange to build our temporary search facility as well as place our temporary trailers. And so when the search activities occur, the waste materials will be excavated from the area shown in green and be hauled in trucks via access roads to the search facility. Then near this south limits of the site, we see the location of where the healing space will be placed once it's ready to be moved to site. Now I'll just share a few more details about the healing space. And so it's meant to be a location for the families and elders to convene and receive support services. Here on screen we see a rendering of the selected design. We've made sure that the deck and a washroom are wheelchair accessible, so those with mobility issues can access the space easily. I'll also share that the magenta red shingles were selected to be symbolic of the red dress. We also have plans to incorporate Indigenous art and design into the healing space as well. In terms of construction, the building is 1,800 square feet and is being procured from a ready-to-move building manufacturer. Construction started at their lumber yard over a month ago and is progressing very well. The building itself is expected to be moved to PGL next month. There will be some on-site work that has to take place, after which time the building will become operational. And so the manufacturer has been sharing progress photos as the build has been moving along, so I'll just share a short time-lapse video to show you how it's been progressing. Okay, now that we know what type of structures we're going to be using to support the search, I'll share more details on how we go about attempting to find the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran. Some of you may be familiar with the images that are on the screen right now, as they are the ones that were included in the feasibility study. Again, on the north half, we see PGL's Phase 1 operation, and the green area represents the area where the remains of the two victims may be located. So PGL breaks up their operation into what they call cells. So the green area in question is in cells 11, 13, and 15. The total amount of waste represented by the green area is 72,000 cubic meters, which is a very large amount. It spans an area of approximately 100 meters by 200 meters, so that's about 4 football fields, and has a maximum depth of approximately 10 meters. And so through our planning process, we've learned more about this 72,000 cubic meters of waste, and we've learned that that was placed over a period of approximately 2 months from in and around April 11th to June 4th of 2022. With some advancements in this knowledge, we now have an understanding that there was likely a fair amount of waste that was deposited in these cells after May 16th, which makes it a little bit more difficult to get to the area of waste that we want to focus our search on, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. So to give us what we believe is the best chance to find the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran, we have developed a 5-staged approach for the search. Stage 1, which was the initial search planning phase, has just concluded. So to give you a little bit more details of what happened during that stage, firstly, an important meeting was held with the families in late October with Premier. From that point forward, we worked with our federal partners to firm up budget commitments and determine funding allocations. And while that was taking place, we started developing our preliminary plans, including the plan for a staged approach. An engineering consultant was engaged, which included a team of environmental specialists, landfill engineers, and industrial hygienists. They have been supporting the development of the regulatory submission, as well as supporting from a technical aspect of our search planning. And as I said, we received our regulatory approval and development permit last week. So we are now in week 2 of stage 2. So we've got a lot of work to do in the coming weeks and months, and this work is going to continue until the fall of this year. During stage 2 is where we get into our detailed planning for the search. We're currently trying to narrow down where the waste from May 16th, 2022 may have been placed. And so that area and a certain amount of material surrounding it will be identified as an area called the targeted zone. So we're in the process of undertaking an engineering assessment to determine where that targeted zone will be determined to be. So during the detailed planning, we'll also be looking for more specifics of the details that were shared during the trial, so we might have a better understanding of what we'll be visually looking for during the search. And during the detailed planning, we'll also be very focused on safety. We are currently finalizing an exposure control plan that will help to address some of the health and safety concerns associated with the search. After that, we'll follow that up by developing detailed health and safety plans, and these will be developed with the support of industrial hygienists as well as individuals from our workplace safety and health areas. During stage 2, we also want to identify our resourcing personnel who will participate in the search activities. And so for this, we've engaged forensic anthropologist Dr. Emily Holland from the Brandon University, who will help support the file. Dr. Holland was a co-chair of the technical subcommittee for the feasibility study, so she's very familiar with the file and very familiar with the requirements. So as part of the support she'll provide, she'll help us assemble a team of search personnel and ensure that adequate training is developed and provided to those workers. Stage 2 also includes the physical site work to get us ready for the search. So that includes site preparation and construction of the temporary structures that we showed earlier. And lastly, during stage 2, we will be conducting a pilot test program to help us better understand what types of conditions we might encounter during the search. So we know the materials are compacted, possibly with high moisture content, so we want to get a sense of what the types of materials we'll be dealing with. So the pilot program aims to excavate a small area of a cell outside of the area shown in green earlier, because we don't want to disturb that area just yet. That waste will be moved to another area, spread and searched through manually using rakes and tools. And the intent is to learn as much as we can during this pilot test program so we can apply those learnings to our detailed plan. And we are targeting for that to start by the end of this month. So once stage 2 is completed, we'll move on to stage 3, which is the displacement and testing stage. So as we said, it's really important for us to first determine where that targeted zone will be located. Again, there's expected to be a certain amount of waste above the targeted zone that we don't necessarily want to focus our search on. So our plan includes excavating and displacing this material above the targeted zone to another area. We plan to preserve and protect this waste in case we want to go back at a later date to search through those materials. In this stage, we may also want to do additional testing to verify some of the assumptions that we made after our pilot test program, and we may also want to confirm where that targeted zone may be. So at this time, we're planning for stage 3 to start later this fall. And that will bring us to stage 4, which is currently planned to start late fall of this year. Stage 4 includes focusing the search on that targeted zone. So the waste will be excavated carefully using heavy equipment with an observer at the cell. The waste will then be hauled to the search facility by truck. The material will be placed in long lines within the search facility using equipment such as skid steers. Then technicians will use rakes and tools to manually spread the materials further and open up bags and packaging. And then those technicians will visually inspect the waste, and they'll be looking for anything of interest, and that can include items that have dates on them, such as receipts and things of that nature. Then after the waste has been thoroughly searched, it will be hauled to the active working phase of PGL's operation. So once we near the conclusion of stage 4, if we have not recovered the remains of Morgan Harris or Marcedes Myran, or partially recovered remains, we'll need to make a determination of what additional searching is recommended. So this could include continuing to dig a little deeper within the cells, or it can include going back to the displaced waste from stage 3. So we're going to look at the information we gather during stage 4 and make a determination at that time. So that concludes the summary of the search plan and the progress to date. I would also like to take a moment to thank Waste Connections of Canada for their excellent collaboration over the last several months. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank my fellow public servants who've been working really hard behind the scenes to honor the victims and to make this search possible. So with that, I'll pass it back to Premier, who will discuss some next steps.
Yeah, well, I'd also like to thank you, Amna, and your team, because I know that a lot of the work to advance our understanding of where the remains might be within the targeted zone. Involved a lot of difficult examination and some serious work, but also paying close attention to the trial and the disclosures that happened there. And I know that for the families, so it's been a very trying experience, but I recognize that anyone who's been following that process closely, it takes a toll. And so I want to acknowledge your professionalism, your thoroughness, and also the heart that you bring to this work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're moving ahead with the Prairie Green Landfill search. This is a commitment that we made to the people of Manitoba, and importantly also to the families of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran. And today we're updating the people of Manitoba about how the search is being conducted and the future steps that we're going to undertake. It's an important public initiative. We hope that it is successful. We cannot guarantee success, but we can guarantee that we're going to try. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Premier, why did you choose to approach this search with a lot of cultural symbolism and traditional areas? It probably would have been a lot easier, probably a lot cheaper to do this search without all of it.
Well, the process for us has had a ceremonial component throughout. I mean, when we first heard about this in late 2022, and the daughters of Morgan Harris and the family of Marcedes Myran were speaking out, we were very moved by that. And we were supportive of them then. And then last summer, when the announcement came that the previous government had decided not to search, we spent time with it, and then we committed to do the search. And when we made that commitment, we did it over a pipe. We smoked a pipe with the Harris family and some of their supporters. And in my mind, there's like four pipe ceremonies that are part of this. The first one happened on that moment. The second one happened after the election, when we apologized for what they had been put through during the 2023 electoral campaign, and we recommitted to searching the landfill. Third pipe ceremony happened last week, when we were able to take the covers off the plan that Amna has been hard at work on. And in my mind, we'll smoke the pipe again a fourth time when the search process is concluded. And so the approach that we're bringing forward is that this is about a compassionate mission to try and recover the remains of these two Manitobans. But there is a ceremonial and a spiritual component to it in our community whenever you talk about dealing with loved ones who have departed us. And so we always want to take care to move forward in a respectful way with that in mind. And all that I'm telling you about here, just to be clear, that's from my perspective. These two families will have their own ceremonial process and way that they want to honor their loved ones that we're going to be sure to provide the space and resources to go through. Throughout, I've also made the commitment that not only would we search the landfill, but that we do so in a fiscally responsible way. And in doing this, I believe that our team is living up to our shared responsibility to all Manitobans, which is, I think Manitobans expect us, when someone goes missing, we go looking, and also that we're responsible with the public resources that we are stewards with. And I'm confident that the plan that Amna Mackin, our project manager, has put together along with her team allows us to move forward in a good way on all those shared responsibilities that we have.
With the expectation that the search will start towards the end of fall, can you talk a little bit about how the weather will factor into the search through the winter months?
Absolutely. So this temporary search facility itself will be heated during winter, so operation can continue. Excavation at the actual cell site, whether winter actually helps us, it helps improve slope stability concerns and things of that nature, so it can be a year-round operation.
So just to confirm, based off the outline and your steps, what the official search of the targeted area is expected to start towards the end of fall?
The official search has already begun. Right? So we have the staged approach there, and the timeline that you're laying out is accurate, and it's your choice about how you want to report that. But what I would say is, if somebody goes missing at sea, when does the search begin? Does the search begin when the divers hit the water, or does the search begin when the boats leave the harbor? According to the approach that Amna's put together, the boats have left the harbor. And for stage 4 to take place, we had to get through stage 1, and we have to power through stage 2 and stage 3. So the search operations have begun. The specific stage that you're interested in will happen later this year.
What role will First Nations leadership, like the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, for example, play in these forthcoming stages? Can you talk a bit about that?
I think they'll have an important role. And we've extended the invitation to participate in the oversight committee that Amna described to the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and to Long Plains First Nations. We're still working on Long Plain First Nation, rather. We're still working on how that committee is going to be composed. But I want us to be very clear that the plan we're moving forward with, the plan that our project manager has developed, is a furtherance of the work that was done by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and that was done by others when we're talking about the feasibility study and the operational report. The plan is just how are we actually going to carry that out? And we've had to make changes in some areas because, again, our understanding of where the remains may be has been advanced since earlier this year. It's been advanced by what we heard in the trial. It's been advanced by some of the analyses that our technical experts have carried out. And so while we've had to maybe change some of the search method and some of the, areas within 3 dimensions of these cells of where we're going to begin, we're going to be starting a little bit lower down. Even though these methods have changed, the heart of what the families brought forward with the support of AMC and Kiganaway Nimananig and the other folks that they're working with is reflected in this. And so we hope to continue having a really strong working relationship and involvement from the families, first of all, but also from Indigenous leadership. And I want people who are paying close attention to this to also see that the work that was put in through those successive stages that has brought us here is being reflected on this. And so certainly we can't take credit for any of that work. There was a lot of really important analyses and advocacy that was taking place, and we really want to indicate our paramount respect for that. And I think the fact that Dr. Emily Holland is engaged, I think, is one way in which we can illustrate that continuity.
Are Winnipeg Police going to be involved in the search?
There will be involved, so they're not involved in the oversight committee or the active management of the search. We are running the search with the oversight committee in terms of operations. The WPS will have some involvement in terms of knowledge that they have from the investigations. There will be some back and forth based on shoulder checking certain details, asking for further follow-up, things like that. And one of the questions that I think we have to sort through with the oversight committee is, if we do get to identifying remains, what is the protocol there? Who is notified? Presumably the families first, but are there additional steps? And I guess part of that is going to involve some consultation with law enforcement authorities. But again, hopefully that provides enough insight into the fact that there would be some involvement, but it's not, in my view, in terms of the active search, if that makes sense. Do you want to flesh that out a bit?
I think what you said is accurate, Premier. They will be providing information, such as the details from the trial. However, if remains are found, that'll be more of a jurisdiction for the RCMP and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. But again, Dr. Emily Holland is very versed in those details, and we'll be fleshing those out with her involvement.
Does that mean this is being treated as an active crime scene? Is it not anymore? Can we, what is the steps for that? Because these are still remains of 2 women, And we might find other remains there. Buffalo Woman is still missing.
That's right. So I would say, to deal with your question sequentially, first and foremost, this is a compassionate mission. And I mean that to say that we want to bring remains home so that these families can move on through the steps of their grieving process. Whether that means memorial services or funerals, we want to give them that ability. I can't guarantee it. I wish we could guarantee success on being able to deliver that. But hopefully also the fact that we are going to make the attempt, that we are launching this mission, that we're working on it every day, does provide some measure of the family's next steps being a little bit clearer in terms of that grieving process and mourning. I also think it's important to say it's called a compassionate search from our perspective, or a humanitarian mission is the term that has been used, because the case has been made in the law courts. The judge is now sitting with the decision that he's going to return to us. And throughout, we've first wanted to respect that process and in no way interfere with it. We didn't want any of the work that you've heard outlined here all of a sudden be the subject of that very important court case. But I just hope that folks understand that that court case stands on its own. And the Crown has argued a very strong case there. And now this is a humanitarian mission, the purpose of which is, although very related in terms of the public interest in these matters, it's not about delivering evidence and, other pieces of information that can be argued in court. This is about bringing loved ones home. This is about returning with respect and dignity to women that two Manitoba families have lost. To the question of other potential remains, I would say that work is part of the conversation. It was part of the meetings that we had last week. And if there is anything that we go through with this compassionate search that can support those efforts, then we will definitely be given the best of our efforts to ensure that collaboration and sharing happens. And at the same time, I acknowledge that there are other efforts when it comes to Mashkatepej Kwe, Buffalo Woman. There are other efforts being led by community organizations and others to try and further our understanding of who that person was, what their identity is, and how we may be able to locate them in the future.
Can you talk a little bit about how much staff is going to be, when you get to stage 4, how many people are going to be involved in stage 4 in that searching the area that it's believed the remains are?
That's a good question. So again, we've engaged Dr. Emily Holland. So part of that support she'll be providing is assembling the team of personnel. In terms of the numbers of workers, that'll depend on a number of factors. So it's expected at any given time there'll be approximately 12 or so, a dozen or so search technicians that'll be needed for each searching line, let's call it. So we're looking at how many searching lines we want to set up, and so generally speaking, the more searching lines you have, the quicker the search can proceed. But of course, that needs to be balanced with the productivity for the excavation rate at the cell, the hauling to the search facility itself, and the ability to spread that waste. So there's other factors, including whether or not the search technicians will be on a rotational schedule, similar to what was the case in the Picton case in the early 2000s. So they were on a 1 hour on, 1 hour off schedule. So all those factors will combine to determine our eventual workforce. So we're hoping the pilot test program answers some of those questions, but again, we'll be working with Dr. Emily Holland and our team of technical experts to balance all those considerations during stage 2.
And how complex is that work? When you say that there might be, an hour on, an hour off, what goes into doing that manual work that these people are going to be doing?
So as I mentioned earlier, first equipment will be used to spread the material in long lines, so something like a skid steer, and then those search technicians will first use rakes and tools to further spread out those materials. They'll need to open bags as necessary, and then they're going to take a careful look at all of the material that has been placed and spread on the ground. And once that waste has been cleared, then that waste material will be moved out of the search facility and another row will be placed. So the exact duration of each search is still to be determined, and again, we hope to learn a little bit more during our pilot test program.
Monsieur le
Yeah, I talked about that earlier. So when we're looking, we're looking for one specific date, right? So we want to try and get a clue in terms of finding receipts or things of that nature that might have a specific date on it to let us know that we're in the right vicinity. We'll also want to be gathering information such as the route of the truck that picked up the bin in question to get a sense of other businesses and residents that might have been on that same route. To if we see waste coming from those entities, that'll give us clues that we're in the right vicinity. So we're going to be constantly looking at the materials and seeing what it's telling us.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, s'il vous plaît, en français, est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire quelles sont les étapes des fouilles qui vont être menées dans les toutes prochaines semaines?
Depuis maintenant et puis la fin du mois, le mois de juin 2024, nous commencerons avec le test de la première fouille qu'on lance au dépotoir pour regarder à une région où ce qu'on pense qu'on ne va pas trouver ces femmes, mais qui a l'air d'être quasiment la même sorte de matière. Et puis, en faire ce test, nous apprendrons beaucoup au sujet de la matière, de l'eau ou comment d'autres défis qu'on surmontera en fouillant dans cette matière-là. Puis, en même temps, la préparation, l'avancement de l'établissement des édifices et puis de cette healing space continuera. Puis, la prochaine étape suivront d'avancer en embaucher tout le monde qui vont fouiller eux-mêmes. Et puis, on voit au 4e étape la fouille de cet endroit directement où ce qu'on pense qu'on pourrait avoir la meilleure chance de trouver Morgan Harris et puis Marcedes Myran. J'espère, vraiment, j'espère qu'on pourrait les trouver.
Alors, vous allez commencer les fouilles exactement à quel moment? Vous prévoyez ça à quel moment de l'année?
Pour nous, ça a déjà commencé. Au niveau officiel, nous avons déjà lancé la fouille de la dépotoir. Mais pour ce qu'on pourrait être là au 4e étape, où ce qu'on regarde dans la région, ce qu'on pense, nous avons la meilleure chance de trouver Morgan et puis Marcedes, il y a encore la première, 2e, 3e étape. Nous avons fini la première, nous sommes maintenant dans la 2e, et puis nous continuerons avec la 3e. Cet été et puis cet automne, la 4e étape.
C'est important de construire un dreaming space où les familles seront présentes durant toutes les fouilles.
Comme des Autochtones, c'est toujours important d'avoir une espèce de connexion spirituelle ou émotionnelle avec un travail où ce qu'on parle de ceux qui sont morts. Et en même temps, parce que nous sommes en train de lancer cette fouille d'un dépotoir qui est dans une approche vraiment grande, parce qu'il y a la chance d'avoir une réaction, une tristesse, une frustration, quoi que ce soit, une réaction émotionnelle pour ceux qui fouillent, c'est toujours important d'avoir un milieu pour ce qu'on pourrait partager ou peut-être recharger nos sentiments avant qu'on retourne et puis continuer les fouilles. Alors, cet édifice, ce bâtiment, c'est là pour les familles, mais c'est aussi une façon d'appuyer ceux qui travailleront au dépotoir aussi.
I'd like to ask Ms. Mackin about this approach where you're trucking some of the waste to another space where then you're going to sort through it. Are there other humanitarian searches, to use your terminology, where this has been employed and recovered people?
From what I understand and all the information we've gotten from our technical experts, this manual type of searching of excavating from the cell, locating the search materials to an area that you can spread the waste, and doing a manual search is the typical way to do landfill searches, whether it's humanitarian or otherwise.
Okay. And is this approach being used here because of the financial constraint? I know the families initially had asked for a lot more money than 40 million. Is the bill, the budget, the reason you're doing it this way instead of the conveyor belt method?
No. This is a better, more suitable method for this type of landfill material. The conveyor belt proposal was modeled after the Picton search, where the material is more like dirt, just to use everyday language. The material here, as Amna was saying, is going to be very wet. There's likely going to be a high moisture content, so there's going to be, I guess, more the consistency of mud or sludge that we're dealing with. And so spreading it out through this approach that's being described here allows us to have the ability to dry that material before it is then the subject of the search, the people going through it manually with rakes and other implements, cutting open bags and going through that whole process there. The drawback that we also identified with a conveyor belt system is that it's reliant on a single piece of machinery. And if the machinery breaks down, the entire search comes to a halt. With this approach, the search is going to continue. And again, if there's some folks who've, sick days or they've got vacation or, whatever comes up in terms of the human resource, the workforce is going to be here, the search will be able to continue on, even if it's missing, a few folks on a given day. So after looking through the analyses, the recommendation that we received and that we endorsed and we support 100% is that this is best suited for the material. This is the most robust fashion that we can move forward with that has the least amount of downtime. And so the families have been forced to wait quite a long time, including because of our decision to respect the trial proceedings. And so moving forward in an expeditious fashion with an approach that has less downtime and that is better suited for the landfill material in question here, I think is the right move.
And it'll be humans, people who look through it. Would you be bringing dogs in at that point or any other aids?
That could be a consideration. We know that they're using a cadaver dog in the Saskatoon search right now, so we'll look to learn more to see that effectiveness, but at this time we're applying for humans.
And if you indulge me, just one more question. Let's say you find the remains you're looking for. Would you then end the search, or would you continue to look for Buffalo Woman?
Well, I think that's part of the conversation we want to have around what stage 5 looks like. The location of Buffalo Woman is not known. We have a very clear idea of where we believe the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran are, and so that's where we're going to start the search. We're going to sort of clear off the top layer, preserve it, but then start the search at the area that we believe gives us the maximum probability of successfully returning the remains to these families. From that point on, though, again, I don't want to predetermine what the conversation is going to be about what they define as recovering the remains, right? I think those are some pretty intense conversations that we're going to have, and out of respect for the flexibility that we want to show with the families, I'll just say that that is a decision that we're going to make together.
Speaking on the families who have been at the forefront of this whole process, when you did sit down and talk with them, was there any discussion at all of when we do get to the time to search the landfill, if they wanted to be involved in some way, even be on the site? Was that a discussion that took place at all?
Yeah, some of the family members, extended family members in particular, did indicate an interest of potentially being among the searchers, the people going through landfill material. And I think that was significant for us to hear directly from some family members that they did have an interest. It wasn't necessarily what we were planning. We were just planning to go out and hire a workforce who either had the expertise or the ability to be trained up with the health and safety and the technical requirements that we're asking of people. But that was a significant moment when we did hear from some folks in the room that they wanted to know if they could be a part of it. And so, yeah, they can. Within the perspective of the people who are going to actively carry out the search, we want to have, first of all, like the utmost of health and safety training, complete deep understanding of like not just the asbestos plan, but also the other health and safety plans for the site. I mean, when you visit the site, you get a health and safety briefing just as a visitor, right? And so to be on site day after day, you're going to require that much more of a deeper understanding. And then you get to the level of training people to be the ones to look out for that one aberration, perhaps, that leads you to the discovery that we're hoping we can make here. Noticing the date on a receipt that might otherwise be very difficult to read. Seeing the logo of a business on a takeout container that all of a sudden you remember from your training was on the route that day. So there's a high degree of, development and training we're going to put into this workforce. And as part of working in a good way with the families, we will have an open door for those folks who want to participate. And, if they're willing to go through all those steps that I'm talking about here, then they will be part of the search. Is there more that you want to add about that?
No, I think you covered it. Again, Dr. Emily Holland will be pivotal in assembling that workforce, and she was very much involved in the feasibility study. She understands the desires put forth by the families at that time. And so we recognize that first they need to be qualified to participate in the search, so we're going to get them the adequate training. But then also we want to make sure that roles are established that are suitable for them, because this can be quite a traumatizing experience, as you can imagine, and we want to make sure that there's going to be trauma supports for them as well.
How big was the team that was working on this plan? While not releasing that information as the trial was ongoing and so on, how big of a team have you had?
There's been many individuals from various entities, so we've been working closely with our partners at Waste Connections of Canada, so their leadership, their landfill engineers, and their site operators, and those who have knowledge of the Prairie Green Landfill itself. We've been working with a consultant firm, so several individuals from that consultant firm, again, spanning from environmental specialists, landfill engineers, and industrial hygienists. And of course, now we're engaging with Dr. Emily Holland. And in terms of public servants, there's been dozens of public servants who have been supporting behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, on that piece, I do want to acknowledge my colleagues and their staff too. Ministers Fontaine, Smith, Bushy, Wiebe have all had active involvement, as well as their teams, and part of that is because we're liaising with the municipal department on some of the permitting requirements. We're turning to the expertise of Minister Smith and Fontaine and the respectful approach that we need to have with these families, as well as their experience working in similar type situations in the past. So I want to acknowledge them and those elected officials and political staffers and deputy ministers and others who've been working on this. The federal government, it's the CERNAC department, as the name goes, so it's Minister Ananda Sangri and his team, both deputies and political staffers. And then, of course, all the work that went in from the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and the people that they retained to develop the reports that, we can view as a precursor to the plan that we're sharing with you here today. So in all, it is a very, very large group of people who've been supporting these efforts, but, heavy lifting, if you will, is being done by Amna Mackin and her team.
What was it like? What were the moments like when you shared with the families that this work had been being done behind the scenes?
Well, I think I'll respect the family's agency and not attempt to speak for them. Like you're talking about some of the more powerful, eloquent young voices in our province when you're talking about the members of these families, and so they're more than qualified to share their perspectives, and I believe that they already have shared some of them in the media. But I would say from our side of the table, if you will, it was very significant and very meaningful. And it's just with a ton of humility that you come forward and feel like I really wish we could have been talking about this in an open and public way the whole time, but we had to respect the trial. And we had to respect the sanctity and independence of the prosecution carrying out their work. And now, hopefully, we're going to have a really strong, close working relationship going forward. And I would say that I really appreciate the open mind and the open heart that the families have engaged with us on this and are continuing to do so. Like as we speak, there's work with the Oversight Committee that is going on, and it's being led by some of the family members in conjunction with our teams. So I just really, I said a bit of it off the top, but I cannot praise these family members enough for the strength that they've shown going through all the multiple stages of this journey. And I'm just very, very appreciative of their continued engagement with us, and I will repay some measure of what they've gone through by ensuring that our government is going to be there, as well as everyone that's working on this, to ensure that we're flexible and compassionate and respectful of what they want the Prairie Green Landfill search to look like.
One of the things we learned during the trial was that 40 feet of elevation of the site itself has happened since 2020. You kind of talked about this itself. This was the testimony during the trial that we got from Constable Newman, one of the constables involved during the search of Brady Landfill, and then also the canvassing of Prairie Green. It was quite stark in court. I was there when this was revealed because we didn't know about this. And this is something you've acknowledged now, right? There was a stopping of garbage trucks at the time in order to, when they were going to go to Brady Landfill, not to, cause problems there for the search itself at the time for Rebecca Contois. For this search, however, that elevation happened because the garbage trucks weren't stopped since 2022, so 2 years ago. In that period, this is now the area that you are describing here, right? That you've targeted and the whole process of it. Has garbage still been coming since you've known now of this specific targeted area of the Prairie Green Landfill? On top of that?
You want to start by talking about the surveying and stuff, and then I can round out your answer?
Sure. So the date of, let me just take a step back. So the green area that we showed earlier was based on 2 survey points. So it's a snapshot in time. So there was a survey taken in May of 2021, and then a survey taken in June of 2022, where if that survey was taken day after May of 2021, it would have looked the same until those cells were used in April of 2022. So we now know that those cells were only used between approximately April 11th of 2022 to June 4th of 2022. PGL formally stopped operations in cells 11, 13, and 15 on June 20th after they were made aware of the victims.
Sorry, so June 20th of what year was that?
2022. But what we've learned is they had already moved off of the operation from those cells and started placing waste in another area. So operations in the other cells are continuing. They've got an active area that they accept waste, but no further waste has been placed in cells 11, 13, and 15.
So I think, Amna has a very deep technical insight into this. And what I would just add is, along with the disclosure that you're talking about and the analysis that her team has been doing, I think the big advance that we've made in our understanding of where the remains may be is that where some of the previous thinking, including as expressed in some of the reports, is that the remains may be nearer to the the top, we now believe that they're closer to the middle, which is not to say exactly in the middle. That's what some of the further technical work and testing is going to be able to refine, but that it's just we're going to have to go through a few top layers before we get to that targeted area of interest. And of course, just to reiterate, those top layers are still going to be preserved so that we can search them at a later date, but the strategy, if you will, behind the search is let's go to that zone where we think there's the maximum odds of finding the remains first, and then broaden the search out from that location. And so I think that that's maybe the rationale, if you will. But I can say anecdotally, we visited PGL with one of the families earlier this year, and going back last week, it looks the same, right? So like obviously the seasonal, difference of us now being in summer is a factor, but it looks, just to the untrained eye, it looks the same as it did earlier. And I just asked Amna to put this slide up because these are 2 tobacco ties that the Harris family tied just to the side of the cells of interest. And they shared with us that these were 2 of the tobacco ties that they shared or that they held in the courtroom. And so they brought this forward as a, I guess, furtherance about the trial process that they've just been through. But it really caught my eye because they tied the 2 tobacco ties together and they signified like our relatives are still connected, first from the trial and now through the search. But as somebody who's gone to a Sundance many times over the years, a traditional Indigenous ceremony, I can tell you that we tie prayer ties together like that when we're at the entrance of something and before we proceed through the exit. And so there's like a rich symbolism in the image that I'm not able to say whether that was the intention, but as somebody coming from an Indigenous cultural background, it was quite striking to see the way that time and time again, the search process continues to be imbued with symbolism that's really relevant and strong from our traditional cultures.
I'm curious as well, you mentioned search technicians earlier, so who qualifies, I guess, to be like a search technician when this work gets started?
So again, we'll lean on Dr. Emily Holland to build that out a little bit more. But so we definitely want to enlist the help of those that have relevant experience in human remains and anatomy. But as we said, we've heard that family members and the community at large may want to participate as well. So we'll be putting out likely a call to see who might be interested in participating. And those individuals would go through a recruitment process led by Dr. Emily Holland. There will be an interview process. So again, we need qualified individuals, and if they are qualified, we'll make sure they have the adequate training to participate.
And is there like a firm date by when you want to have that workforce like set in stone? Or?
We'll be detailing that during stage 2, but the thought now is we'd be looking to likely recruit late summer, early fall.
Anything else?
I just had one more. At the start, you talked about the permitting that you needed and the licenses. It sounded like it was pretty smooth. Was there any opposition filed to any of those applications?
No, everyone's been very supportive and understanding of what we're trying to achieve here.
And people work really hard to do it on an expedited basis.
That's right.
I would say too.
Yeah.
So we want to acknowledge those efforts. Just to add a community perspective to the previous answer too, I would say there are folks who have experience out there, and we'll be putting that call out for them. Some of it may be very direct experience doing similar searches like this because they have taken place both in our province and in other provinces. But if you think through just general, search and rescue experience that people have, and then there's been many people who've been active on the searches of former residential schools and other sites where there are ancestors. So we will be putting that call out, and I do expect that there will be people in Manitoba who fit the bill, both in terms of the technical expertise, but also the community and cultural awareness. All right. Well, thanks so much. This is an important initiative for our government and for the people of Manitoba, and we will continue to provide updates as we go along. I know that you'll continue to inquire and ask about progress reports along the way, and so we'll continue to work with you on that. And we do hope that we'll be able to bring some of that news very shortly. So thanks again, everybody, for your attendance today.